Wow, this looks great, I added, putting my beer down for a fork. Hey, Mike, Tony said again, looking at his plate of food. Do me a favor and pass the salt. One salt coming up. Baked potatoes, broccoli, red fish, and bread. A fresh baguette from Whole Foods. I was hungry, anxious to eat instead of talk for a while. You've outdone yourself, Phil, Tony said across the table with his mouth full. He chewed and swallowed before continuing. Fish is fantastic. What'd you put on it? What do you think? Answered Phyllis, indifferent to Tony's compliment. The meal was great, but it was by no means exotic. The "you've outdone yourself" part from Tony seemed a bit strong. The meal was good, but it was simple. Phyllis looked over to Carol, and Carol looked at Phyllis. They smiled at something and then began speaking slowly, in chorus. Mixed Cajun spices, Cher. They laughed. It was obviously some kind of private ya-ya joke that went back a ways. Carol looked over and smiled with a wink. I dug back into my food. I was a little drunk a little too soon and figured the food might help me fight it. I needed my wits with me. Everyone ate quietly, everyone except Carol, who was quiet but only ate half of her baked potato. Mouths were wiped and plates pushed forward. Tony spotted the untouched potato half on Carol's plate. Hey, Carol, give that potato to Mike. We gotta fatten this man up a bit. Mike, you're way too skinny. Here, finish Carol's potato. And I tried, but it was still a big piece and I left half of it. Tony was a tad off-putting, but Tony was right about the skinny part. Most of the time it doesn't bother me, but in the presence of the more full-figured, it makes me a bit self-conscious. Tony was understandably bigger, but I had nothing on Carol or Phyllis either. Carol was 4 or 5 inches shorter, but she was thick and womanly and might have seen me as a lightweight. Phyllis didn't have the same presence as Carol, but she was taller. And the more I looked at her, the more I marveled at how fit and half sexy she was for a woman in her 40s. She had long, thinly muscled arms, square shoulders, and her chest, as I mentioned, was a minor unbroad spectacle. Her face was also starting to grow in. Features more severe than Carol, and her smile a bit too gummy, but nevertheless attractive, especially on such a trim-line body. Who wants port? Phyllis asked the table. Port? Asked Tony. Since when do you have port around this house, Phyllis? Carol asked next. Since forever. I just never drink it. Someone gave me a bottle at my Christmas party last year. None for me, said Tony, sounding certain. No, none for me either, followed Carol. And taking the 2 refusals as my lead, I declined the port also. How about coffee? Phyllis asked next. She pushed back from the table and picked up hers in my place. Tony then stood and grabbed his and Carol's. I'll take a cup, said Carol. Good. Yeah, me too, I said. If someone else is having some, then I would. Tony? Phyllis asked him at the same. No, none for me, thanks. 3 coffees. Phyllis turned to the freezer to get the coffee grounds, and Tony sat back down heavily. There was a lull in the conversation, so I asked a burning question. By the way, how do you all know each other? Who? Asked Carol. All of you. Well, started Carol, only to be interrupted by Tony at the opposite end. Carol and Phyllis used to bartend at Check Print Charlie's. He paused and grinned. And I used to drink there. Check Print? I asked, confused. It's spelled checkpoint, but it's pronounced Check Print, like Berlin and Earl. I wasn't following, but Carol filled me in. It's the local slur, Michael. All the OIs are ERs. Checkpoint, check print. Okay. Oh, I answered Carol. I still didn't understand, but I could figure it out later. So when was that? When did you 2 bartend? I had figured that, like me, Tony had probably met Carol when he moved into his apartment. Apparently, the relationship preceded this. Too long ago to talk about, said Phyllis. Let's talk about the present. Hey, Mike, what do you want in your coffee? Just black, I answered dumbly. I like milk in my coffee, but in the company of women, for some reason, I generally take it black. Milk for me, Carol said toward the counter. But let me get it. Carol stood up. What else do you want to know? Asked Tony. Anything you want. Ask away. Why the sudden openness? I wondered. Why all this talk about the past? Phyllis insisted. Good question, Carol agreed, reaching into the fridge for milk. Phyllis was at the sink filling the coffee carafe with cold water. How about how we all came to live in Mid-City? Tony offered. Or how about how me and Carol fell madly and hopelessly in love? Here we go, said Phyllis at the sink. Hopelessly in love. The word stuck. I mulled them over. An outright lie or an awkward half-truth? Carol shut the refrigerator door and then slapped the back of Tony's head with her free right hand as she passed him. She stepped past Phyllis and put the milk down on the counter. Tony ignored the slap and continued talking. Oh yeah? I said, acting politely interested, as playfully as I could, keeping open the possibility that Tony was completely full of shit and not to be taken at all seriously. Half true or not, Carol clearly didn't like the direction of the conversation, so with deference to her slap, I changed the subject. Tell me about the summers down here. Are they as bad as I hear they are? Negative, answered Tony. It's no hotter than anywhere else. He stood then and walked into the living room on his way to the bathroom, his voice trailing off. I was in Boston in August once, and it was hotter than hell. She faced the table, stretched her arms up over her head with fingers locked, and in the motion revealed a very flat stomach. A 40-something woman with a teenage son. What was she doing to keep it so tight? Carol turned and leaned against the kitchen counter, holding her empty mug with both hands, waiting for coffee. Well, I began again, stumbling through an unplanned comment. It does get pretty hot in the summer, no matter where you are. Carol grabbed the loose reins and steered the conversation off into the sunny future. Speaking of warm weather, I've got to start planning my party. Phyllis stuck her long, slender hands into her pockets and leaned against the counter next to Carol. That's right, she agreed. Michael here doesn't know about your Jazz Fest party. Party? Best party of the year next to Voodoo on the Bayou, Phyllis explained. Voodoo on the hoo-hoo? I asked, attempting to be funny, smiling foolishly. Voodoo on the Bayou is the Bayou St. John Halloween party, Phyllis continued, smiling. But Carol here is the hostess with the mostess. What's this now? Tony asked, flattening his belt tip against the thick waist of his jeans, re-entering the kitchen. We were just talking about the Jazz Fest.